I don't know where to go from that, but I really appreciate being here and being able to share my fear and my desperation about our future, and that has been created by past generations. And recently I've been reconsidering whether I want to have children, because I'm not sure if I want to bring more people into a world that is destined for chaos.
And why the Supreme Court somehow is involved in telling a federal district court whether or not it can have a trial. That is unprecedented.
California to New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, we said this land belongs to you and me.
This changes everything. This changes everything. Tell me to do. But Your Honor, this is unprecedented. This is extraordinary. Plaintiffs seek unprecedented standing to pursue unprecedented claims in pursuit of unprecedented remedies.
Okay, so you want to know more about this? Come to the panel! Come to the panel!
All coming to be part of today's Greenfield look at trial of the century, rally and panel conversation in recognition of the lawsuit Juliana versus U.S., which has been filed by 21 youth. Their lawsuit states, as you've heard, that government officials have known for more than 50 years that carbon pollution from fossil fuels was causing climate change, and that policies on oil and gas deprive them of life, liberty, and property. They also say the government has failed to protect natural resources as a public trust for future generations. The lawsuit wants a court to order the government to stop permitting and authorizing fossil fuels, quickly phase out carbon dioxide emissions to a certain level by 2100, and to develop a national climate recovery plan. The trial is scheduled to begin today, as you heard outside, and there are rallies being held all across the country. So that's one of the things to know, is that our Children's Trust, which is based in Eugene, Oregon, and has been supporting the trial with legal help and has helped to organize and encourage rallies all across the country. This is not just a Greenfield deal. This is for all of us around the earth. And because there's a stay on the trial, there's no stay on climate change, right? The issues are still in front of us. So we are out here today supporting the kids and their lawsuit, and talking together about what that means for us in Greenfield and how we can take action here. So the trial is on hold, or the stay was granted to the government because for the second time the Trump administration went to the Supreme Court and said, help, we do not want to go to trial with these kids.
They said they can't afford it.
They said they can't afford it. And
that's the only reason they gave.
So they went to the Supreme Court earlier in the summer trying to get the case thrown out, and the Supreme Court ruled 8-0 unanimously that the trial could go forward. And in fact, both the Obama administration and the Trump administration have tried every way they can think of to get out of going to court, saying that the youth have no right to sue the government, and each time the courts have decided in favor of the young plaintiffs, that they do have a right to sue. When the Ninth Circuit Court sided with the plaintiffs, affirming their right to go to trial, one of the judges, Judge Ann Aiken, said that, quote, exercising my reasoned judgment, I have no doubt that the right to a climate system capable of sustaining human life is fundamental to a free and ordered society. So briefly, the United States is not as healthy a country as it once was. In the 50s and early 60s, we were considered about the 5th among the top 5 healthiest countries in the world, and now we are approximately 26th. And one of the main reasons that's happening is our relationship to the environment. Whatever your politics, whatever your party, whatever your income level, you still need to breathe, still need to drink water, eat foods grown in soils. As someone once said, if you don't believe that, try holding your breath while you count your money. The politicians in the executive and legislative branches have not acted in response to what 97% of scientists say, that climate change is real and that we have only a limited time to respond by changing our choices before it's too late to avoid catastrophic consequences. And the young people who have the most at stake have turned to the courts on behalf of all of us filing this lawsuit in 2015. It seems like it should be a straightforward issue. Why wouldn't we choose to have clean air, clean water, and healthy soil? But we know that there are some who want to balance environmental awareness against what's good for the economy, and that it's a complicated issue. So we're here today together to try to understand more about the trial, about the case, but also about the issues, both legal and environmental, and to talk about what it means for us here in Greenfield. And here to help us learn more about it are Bill Newman, head of the Western Massachusetts ACLU. MJ Adams from the Greenfield Department of Community and Economic Development, and I understand lots of other places too. And then 3 students from the area. Jacob Frank is a student at Greenfield High School. Sorry, I was in the wrong city there for a moment. And Dylan Badillo. Dylan Badillo, also from Greenfield High School. And Madeline Lombard from Four Rivers. Thank you all. I also want to acknowledge that there are many young people here from
Slowly grown up.
I'm glad they are part of the conversation. So we're going to start the conversation with comments from the panel, and then we'll move to a larger conversation in which we are all in this together. So it's not like you're addressing us, we're talking to each other in the room. But this is a trial, so let's start with the lawyer on the panel. Hi, Bill. Many of us have watched Perry Mason or Judge Judy, and that may not be enough to help us understand what the issues are. So perhaps you can help us to understand a little about what are the issues of the trial and what are we looking at?
Well, I actually think that if you want to understand this trial, you have to understand the politics of this trial. And I'll spend a minute or 2 or 3, because I'm a lawyer and 2 minutes means 5, but that aside for a moment. Let's look at a couple of the legal issues. Then I want to talk about the political issue that is really the paramount consideration when you look at this trial, and what the Supreme Court is doing, and why the Supreme Court somehow is involved in telling a federal district court whether or not it can have a trial. That is unprecedented. But it is. I mean, we have a system of trial courts, the federal district courts, and the appellate courts, the Circuit Court of Appeal, which is the Ninth Circuit in this case, which oversees Oregon, and then a Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land, of course. And the Supreme Court does not get involved until there is a normal appellate process that has run its course, except this time the Supreme Court says, wait a second. You know, if we have a trial here, people are going to hear facts, and the judge is going to determine facts. And all of the corruption of the United States government in cahoots with the fossil fuel industry is going to come to light, and it's going to be a public record. And you know what? We can't have that. Except guess what? They don't say that. They do that, but that's not what they're saying. And so far, at least up until today, every court that has looked at this said, yes, the district court judge said there should be a trial. Let's have a trial. And then the judge will make findings, and there'll be a decision as to whether or not the law does and the Constitution does or does not provide a remedy for these young people and these plaintiffs. And we'll decide, and then the Circuit Court of Appeals will review that, and then, well, it will get to the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Kavanaugh and his friends, and where life, I don't think, looks very optimistic, but at least we have a normal process, and the truth can be heard. That's not too much to ask of the federal judiciary. Let's hear the facts. Let's hear the truth. Why is the Supreme Court going to, or is the Supreme Court going to interfere with the truth-telling system? Wow. And that's the question. let's look a little bit at what the legal claims are, because I think people will find this interesting. This starts with the Fifth Amendment and the clause that says, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." Now, that's pretty simple, and now it gets complicated. Because what does that mean, due process of law? There are two kinds of due process, one of which we're concerned about here and one of which we're not. What we're not concerned about is procedural due process. Procedural due process means the process that is due. So, for example, in a criminal trial, there's lots of process that's due. You get to cross-examine witnesses, and you get to have a lawyer, and if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. And you get to present your defense, and you get to testify if you want to or not testify. Lots of process, okay? In a parole hearing, not so much process. Probation, not so much process. In your unemployment hearing, even less process. Immigration, virtually no process. But the definition, due process, procedural due process, the process that is due in a given kind of proceeding. That okay? People with me on that so far? Great, because that's not what we're concerned about. The other part of due process is what's called substantive due process. And that is what we're concerned about here. And substantive due process is not easy to define, but it is those rights that are fundamental to a free and ordered society. Substantive due process is invoked when you say, you know this is a fundamental right. There's a fundamental right to privacy, right? I mean, that's essential to the United States. That's what the country is built on, right? And where in the United States Constitution is the right to privacy specifically protected?
Nowhere.
Louder?
Nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. It's protected because of the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment applicable to the federal government and the 14th Amendment applicable to the states. It is because it is a fundamental right that is necessary, essential, a foundation to a free and ordered society. That is where Roe v. Wade finds its ballast. This is where marriage equality is, for the most part, grounded. When you talk about due process and substantive due process, you're also talking about the other rights that are in and around it, like equal protection. Because equal protection and substantive due process overlap in very significant ways. So, substantive due process is at the heart of this case. Because what can be more fundamental than the right to life? And if we cook the earth and kill life on earth, all these other rights, all these other wonderful rights that Judge Kavanaugh will not stand up for, won't be worth anything because we won't have an earth or a country to live in and on. It's that fundamental. And so when these plaintiffs said, we have a right to life, we have a right to liberty, we have a right to have an earth where we have a chance at a future, and that gets involved in their equal protection claim, saying, hey, don't you people who control the world, the government, don't you have an obligation as an equal protection claim for people who are younger than you to preserve life on earth? Don't you have that obligation? And I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
They do. So, what are the various claims that the government has saying, we don't want to have a trial, we don't want the truth, we don't want the facts to come out? And as you know, the fossil fuel industry and those corporations intervened in this case en masse when it started, but then after Trump was elected, they said, that's okay, we can count on the Department of Justice to take care of it for us. And what they're saying, and what those words in some of the songs we heard this afternoon were saying was, look, there is no way that this case will ever be heard or should ever be heard, says the government, because these 21 young people don't have standing to bring the case. They don't have, the case is not ripe. There's not a real case or controversy. This is a political question. These are all rubrics that the Supreme Court says, you can't come to court. You can't get in the front door. We're going to say, you don't have the right to bring this case. That's what standing is. You don't have you don't have a claim here that we can recognize. The fact that you're a young person and you may not have an earth to live on or a country to live in, that doesn't give you standing to bring this case. That's not a case or controversy. That's not something the court will allow you to bring, a case that the court will allow you to bring. Or they say, you don't have standing because you're not a corporation. If you were a corporation suing another corporation, well, come on in the front door. But you're just a citizen, you're just a person, you're just a group, you're just environmentally concerned. You don't have standing. That's what the government claims. You can't bring this case because your claim doesn't count in this court. And this Supreme Court could find that. They could. But I said earlier, this is a political case. It is a significant political case. And the fight has gone on for 3 years, and up until 2 days ago, every court that has looked at this said, this case should go forward. And the powers that be got very scared. They said, oh my God, it really is. The truth will come out. And we can't afford that. And it is our obligation as citizens, it is our obligation as residents, it is our obligation as people on the earth to say the truth has to come out. And this case is a mechanism for that happening. And with some luck and some really good lawyering, and they just filed a 103-page brief with the Supreme Court explaining why this case should go forward, that will happen, and the truth will be heard.
So, Bill, one more brief question. If the Supreme Court ruled 8-0 over the summer that the trial could go on, and what the government is saying now is we just can't afford it because we've got to pay for golf trips.
Well, they said, technically they said 50 days of trial. I don't know what has changed. There's a slight procedural difference between a writ of mandamus, don't ask, and a stay of the proceedings. They amount to the same thing in practice. For the Supreme Court to reverse itself is an overtly political decision, not a judicial one. That doesn't mean they won't make it.
Thank you. So next, to help us...
What was mandamus? That's not that complicated, actually, okay? It just means we are telling you to do something. It's Latin, so the lawyers can charge you for and tell other lawyers what they mean in Latin, but it's not complicated. It's a writ, which is a piece of paper saying do something or don't do something. It's really not complicated. It amounts in this case to the same thing as a request to stay the proceedings.
Thank you. Hi there. You get to talk
After Bill.
after Bill, right? And to define everything Greenfield. So the question of public trust, how does Greenfield, what does that mean in terms of dealing with the public trust, the air, the water, et cetera? Sustainable Greenfield, what does that mean? Can you talk a little bit about how the city interacts with that?
Sure. My name's MJ Adams, and I'm actually here in the place of Carol Collins and Nancy Hazard, who actually are the experts who should be up here but are not available today. So they gave me a little background to read to you, and I'm happy to do that, but I'll also share with you some of my perspectives of what it means to be working here in a community that seems to very much highly value the environment and is very much concerned about the future for the children and all the residents in the area. So since 2008, Greenfield has taken its obligation to protect us from climate change very seriously. That year it conducted an energy audit, and when Mayor Forgy saw the results of the audit, she made a commitment that Greenfield would reduce its climate change emissions by 80% by 2050. The audit also revealed in 2008 that $67 million left Greenfield to pay for fossil fuel to heat and light our homes and businesses and power our cars. She's therefore also made the commitment to reduce the money leaving our region for the purchase of fossil fuels to zero by 2050. Greenfield has been working hard to make good on those commitments over the past 10 years. So what has our government done for us? Greenfield was one of the first green communities in the state and has reduced municipal energy consumption by 27%. And only a dozen communities have reduced their energy use by 20% committed to as a green community. Carol Collins was hired as our Energy and Sustainability Coordinator, and in 2014, Mayor Martin made it a separate department to continue to make progress in reducing the town's energy use. Today, the municipality is saving $500,000 on its utility bills. Half its electricity is generated by a solar farm out on our landfill. Several projects have been completed and several more are in the works to reduce the town's energy consumption and also reduce costs. We have a very low energy multimodal transit station, have expanded public transit, and installed new housing on called Green River Commons down on Deerfield Street that is net zero ready. We created the Greenfield Light and Power Company so that everyone could use 100% green, renewably produced electricity at an affordable price. We have also supported residents by offering Energy Smart Home program and connected people with financial incentives that Mass Save offers to upgrade our homes and reduce our energy use. We also offered a solar challenge program and partnered with a local PV installer and added a total of 500 kilowatt hours of solar to residences and businesses at a reduced cost by bulk purchasing equipment. But 6 years ago, the planning board secured funds so that all of us could write a plan for our town's future. That was called Sustainable Greenfield. That plan was written with very significant public input and published 4 years ago. And as a result, after the plan was published, the town actually created a committee, the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, to take that plan and to live into it, to lean into it, to actually bring it to life and to start accomplishing the goals that the community had set for themselves. Just a few months ago, Town Council adopted a resolution that strengthened our commitment to protect our planet by moving towards 100% renewable energy and fossil fuel-free future, and by adopting PACE, which is a special program that provides a funding source for businesses and nonprofits to be able to install energy-efficient energy improvements in their properties. We are now here looking to continue to live in and live out what we've outlined for ourselves in the future with the Sustainable Greenfield Plan. That really looks at what we can do to make sure that the future is secure, healthy, and viable, and robust for the future generations.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, it sounds so simple. Why wouldn't we, again, want clean air, et cetera, et cetera? And many of us would say, why can't the city do more? Can you talk a little bit about how it gets complicated just from the realities of being in the middle of a city with a budget and et cetera?
Sure, that is one of the challenges where we face, how do we wisely use our tax resources? And it's a big challenge because we know that, you wonder sometimes if you're doing it just at the municipal level and you're encouraging individual change or municipal change, is enough being done? Doesn't there need to be a bigger, broader, more regional, more statewide, more national effort that really needs to shift the paradigm on how we're really living in our communities that is really going to make the big difference for us in the future? But that said, we do what we can. Because we are a green community, we actually have access to some special resources that help with the energy efficiency. I think we're very lucky to have a town council and a city that really highly values the environment, and we state it all the time. We're very proud about our green efforts. They are a step forward, but are they a step far enough forward? I think that's out there, and the question is, what can we do more? How can we be more comprehensive? How can we be more far-reaching? And that might mean a real substantial change in how we view ourselves as a community. We've been looking at Greenfield and really looking at the downtown area and really trying to make it that livable, walkable place where people will live and work and play and not need to rely on fossil fuel to get here. How can we build a stronger sense of community so that we're interacting with each other more, that we're getting local food, that we're taking care of most of our basic human needs by things that are produced locally as much as we can. And I think Greenfield is a step ahead of many communities in really thinking about the local economy, the local environment, and what we individually can do, but what we as a city need to really step forward and provide leadership on doing to make it really work.
Thank you. So this trial is significant in so many different ways, and one of the ways is to recognize that the people who are in the lead right now are young people who have the most at stake in terms of the longest lives in front of them. And we're very happy to have a number of young people with us today, including 3 on the panel, and like to hear from them. Dylan Badillo, who is sitting next to me here, is a senior at Greenfield High School. He does a lot of running, I understand. And He's a tri-season varsity athlete who can be found studying if he's not running. And one of the things he says is that he likes to do while he's running long distances is the scenery, and wants to make sure that kind of scenery, that beautiful scenery, is around for years to come. So, Dylan, what is it about this trial or about what's going on that has brought you here today, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd have to say, as long with a whole bunch of my other peers. Oh, this one. Ooh,
More room.
fancy schmancy. The environment is not a problem that a lot of kids in my generation chose to focus on or chose to decide to spend a lot of time researching. It's one we were forced to research because of the way the generations before us have treated the earth, of how just lazy people have been, and just how much of a need for change there has been in the past. Now that there's other youth doing something and they're trying to make a change, it's really lighting a fire under our butts, showing us that we can actually do something too. We can join the cause. And as we're getting ready to turn 18, we're getting ready to be able to vote, we will soon be able to make a change and show the world what our younger generation is really passionate about.
Thank you, Dylan. Jacob Frank is also a student at Greenfield High School. He's a very concerned adolescent who desires to change our treatment toward the earth in any way possible. He's a member of the Environmental Club at Greenfield, wearing his colors proudly. What got you into the Environmental Club to begin with?
All right, so the ecosystems are dying, the oceans are being acidified, food sustainability is becoming more and more difficult. Just everything is going wrong in the environment right now. We see it, but we don't believe it, we don't look at it enough. And by joining the Environmental Science Club, I hope to learn more about just what exactly is happening. What are we doing to this earth, and how can we fix it? That's exactly what I wanted to learn, and that's exactly what I'm doing with the help of my biology teacher, Miss Wilkins, over here. Who also runs the club. She's taught me many things about the problem that we're having, the problem at hand. She's educated me about it, and I'm just very concerned.
Thank you for your concern. We need more of that. And Madeline Lombard, who is here from Four Rivers.
Four Rivers Charter Public School.
And I know that there's a strong emphasis on looking at the environment for many of you at the school. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There is. I'm a senior at Four Rivers, and we're beginning our energy documentary right now, which is focused on the recent house explosions in Massachusetts caused by Columbia Gas, which isn't, climate change isn't a focus of that, but climate change has always been a very, very frightening topic for me personally. I've been an avid plant nerd since toddlerhood, and I recently learned that up to 70% of plant species face extinction in the next century if we continue to emit the way we are. And plants directly or indirectly feed almost all life forms. They oxygenate our atmosphere, provide timber and medicine, and provide tons of other services. They're incredible. So I always looked forward to a promising future to explore this passion. But now I'm imagining facing up to 70% extinction of the thing that I most love. And so I want to dedicate my future to solutions, to harnessing plants to sequester carbon and help solve our looming crisis.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So you've heard briefly from members of the panel, and now we want to open it up and have a larger conversation, which can include concerns and fears and thoughts and hopes and ideas for how we might work together. I do want to say, especially in the spirit of how things have been in the last week or two, there may be things said here that you don't agree with, and that's fine. That's actually how democracy is supposed to work, is they're supposed to listen to each other and learn from and with each other. So feel free to disagree with what is said and the ideas, but not with the people who say it, right? So we want to listen with respect, to think about what's said, and perhaps together we can figure out some next steps. So with that, let's open the floor to whoever has comments, and keep them brief so that we can hear from as many people as possible.
My name is Glenn Ayers, and I don't know if anyone on the panel can address this, but the same youth who are doing this lawsuit also sued the state of Massachusetts. They requested that the state implement the Global Warming Solutions Act. This was a few years ago. And the state, the DEP, which is responsible for setting regulations that require the annual aggregate reduction of greenhouse gases, the DEP rejected their request to pass new regulations and said that the state has already done enough. And the youth appealed that, so these were the same youth plus many students from the Boston school, public school region. Hundreds actually of students signed on to this lawsuit. And, sorry, that's my phone. And they appealed that decision. It went to the Supreme Judicial Court. They took it on, basically they took it on before it went to appeal. They took it on their own initiative. And they issued the Kane decision, which is an amazing decision that says that DEP has not done enough, and they need to pass regulations for entire parts of the economy that emit greenhouse gases. And that was a huge decision. It's not been mentioned, but it was part of the same effort. And right now, DEP has issued some regulations, but they are neglecting massive amounts of emissions in the state. And that's something that we need to do here in Massachusetts in conjunction with the effort that the youth are doing nationwide. And if anyone wants to talk to me about that specifically, I am working with a group of people to file a lawsuit to try to push the DEP to implement the Kane decision, which the Supreme Judicial Court said that they must implement that fully. So I'm going to.
The DEP is.
The Department of Environmental Protection, which is a euphemism, in my opinion. Anyway, I would love to talk to anybody who's interested in signing on to that lawsuit. We intend to file pretty soon. We currently have 19 co-plaintiffs, all from Wendell, but we'd like to expand that across the Commonwealth, and we especially want youth to sign on to this action. So please come see me. I'm going to stay here and come talk to me. And anyone else who has any information about the Kane decision specifically, I would like to hear that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Boston, and I have a question for Bill. So this is the Supreme Court. If they do something which, as I understand what you said, they are going outside the law, who reprimands the Supreme Court? Or are we losing our democracy? Is that what's happening?
Well, that's a big question. Are we losing our democracy? I think the answer to that is yes. The question, and I think this is actually one of the lessons from the Kavanaugh hearings that is both beneficial in some ways, in pulling back the curtain, and detrimental in the sense that it has cost the Supreme Court this veneer of legitimacy that has been so essential to its functioning. And I think what the Kavanaugh hearing showed is that this is a highly politicized branch of government, not independent jurists simply making decisions based on the law and on precedent and on the Constitution. The Supreme Court in this posture is not going to make a definitive ruling on this case, in my opinion. It will make a procedural ruling having to do with what the district court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said with regard to the case going forward. And it's the Supreme Court. There's no one higher. There's no institution higher. The court could make a decision on the substantive claims, but it's apt to say something much more limited because that would be consistent with this allegedly conservative perspective and approach to decision-making, which is to make it on the most limited ground, which would be something procedural about the motion to dismiss and whether or not there's a sufficient standing for the plaintiffs to go forward, or whether it's a political question, or whether it should be in front of the court at all. I think it's not likely to get to the heart of the matter. I would just say one other thing, if I might, about this question that comes up under the state environmental protection laws. The point, I think, or a point that comes out of that discussion is that there are more limited, legally limited grounds on which this case could be, theoretically, could be litigated. You could litigate whether the Environmental Protection Agency is doing its job. The answer to that is no. You could litigate whether or not the Congress has passed the laws that are necessary to cabin in the fossil fuel industry and protect us all, and our water and our air. And the answer to that is no. But the court, this court, is going to say those are political questions, not for this court to decide. There's one other piece. There are state laws and there are federal laws. And the fight will be in part here about whether or not the federal laws, at what point the federal laws preempt the state laws. This is the same fight that we had about the pipeline here, right? Whether or not the federal law preempts, takes away from the state, invests in the federal government this overarching right to decide about pipelines, because they're interstate pipelines and the Congress has exhaustively legislated in that area. So there will be fights between what states can do and what the federal government can do, and regulatory agencies matter, the Administrative Procedures Act matter, who's making the appointments to the court matter, who's making to the appointments to the Department of Environmental Protection matters. It matters in the state, it matters in the federal government. Elections have consequences, and we're seeing them.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yes. My name's Judy Fox. I have a question for you, Bill. I'm wondering, with the case now where Juliana has responded, can the Supreme Court wait indefinitely in their response, or is there a time frame within which they have to respond?
There is no court higher. No one's going to tell the Supreme Court. Now, theoretically, Congress actually could pass some kind of a procedural rule. The Supreme Court, in my judgment, is not going to wait indefinitely. It will issue some kind of procedural decision. I don't know if there is a court rule that specifically says what the timeline is. I would be very, very surprised if this hangs out on the docket of the Supreme Court for very long. Watch me be wrong.
One of the things that's pretty clear is that leadership in terms of dealing with climate change is not going to come from Washington, D.C. at this point. If we are going to make change, it's going to come from communities, from neighborhoods, from at the local level, where we are here breathing air and drinking water and eating things that come out of the ground. So while the trial is really important, I don't want to lose focus on the fact that there are actions we can take and things we can do. So maybe we can talk together some about what are some steps we can take, what are some concerns we have. I see a hand over here and another approaching the mic. So I think she was first. So come on up if you would to talk into the mic.
I'll just be loud. I don't want to leave my people here. Hi, I'm Edith Wong. I'm from Stony Burnham School. I'm the student head of service and sustainability. So recently we heard about this case and we heard about the announcement that UN released about that we're basically all gonna die in 2040, and we don't want to die so early. So the Community Service Club and are organizing one project that we call Project 2040, that we want to challenge the community in our school to do something, even something small, to save our local community, or starting from the environment in our school. And I was talking to my advisor and my biology teacher. We see the students in our community being passionate about this issue, but actually when we go to the dumpster, we look at the compost bin in our dining hall, we still see disappointing things happening. People still do not recycle properly, they still put cardboard box into the dumpster. And I think what we need to work on in our community is to actually get this issue into people's heart, instead of just have people yelling orally. We have to get them pay attention, truly pay attention and truly care about this issue, because it will affect every one of us.
Well, my name's Daria Fisk. I live here in Greenfield. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having this, for being here, all of you, and for the young people doing this suit. I mean, I'm proud of you, for sure. And I want to say about, my question really is for MJ, because I feel like transportation is such a big issue, and that we can't really solve this without solving transportation. And so I'd like to know what you're doing. I mean, I think luckily we've had some wonderful people elected recently who want to work on this, particularly between Greenfield and Boston and North and South and high-speed rail and stuff like that. But how does Greenfield fit in with this?
Happy to answer that. Transportation is a critical issue to work on if we're going to be reducing fossil fuel use. One of the things we've done in Greenfield is really tried to encourage electric vehicle use, because we know that using cleanly produced electricity is one way to reduce the fossil fuel burning. So that's one of the things you'll see around town is electric vehicle chargers. And I know that down at the new Green River Commons, actually the newest resident there has installed an electric vehicle charger for her own use, which is really terrific. We really need to electrify a lot of our energy use and push the electric use that we're using to be generated by clean energy, hydro, wind, solar, by the clean energies. The other thing we're doing is really, like I said, trying to really make the downtown Greenfield a neighborhood where people can live and work and walk and enjoy life without having to rely on vehicles. We've moved from trying to make it more bicycle friendly. We've implemented the Complete Street program, which is really trying to make it safe and accommodate more pedestrians and bicycles on the roadways. The public transit piece, you mentioned the rail. We will see commuter rail start up here to Greenfield in May 2019, so we're really excited by that. But what that means is that people might be driving down, but we have a new municipal garage where people can park and then hop in the train and go down to Springfield, Hartford, New Haven. So transportation is a real critical egg to crack. I mean, it's really important, and the way we can do that is by making Greenfield a much more walkable, friendly, pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly community, and at the same time, look at the challenges of expanding public transit. We know our FRTA system is one of the smallest in the state. It's faced some cuts, and in order for public transit to work and to be viable, people have got to use it. So people need to get out of their cars and onto the transit system in order so that we have the number of people riding the buses that really makes it look viable, that makes it viable. And so that's pretty critical.
I'm curious if you've thought about white bicycles. You've heard about the white bicycles and other
communities? Yeah, yes, in fact, I have. I live in Northampton, and there's a Valley Bike Share, which is a shared bicycle program, much like they have in Boston. And I've actually been talking to the FERCog staff. There's apparently been a pilot study done about bringing it up into Greenfield, which I would love to see. I ride them all the time down in Northampton. They are terrific, but I can't ride them up here and get back in an hour because that's all I have on my. But they're actually electric assist. So
I've
you
heard
can.
about them. Tell them.
They're wonderful. It's called Valley Bike Share. You join, and I paid $90 a year, and it gives me unlimited 1-hour rides. I live pretty close to Northampton High School. There's a docking station at the high school, so when I need to go downtown, I can do a 10-minute walk to the high school, hop on a Valley Bike Share, ride down to downtown Northampton. You can ride over to Amherst. There's docks over there. There's one at the YMCA. They're looking to expand East Hampton into the set of bikes, but these are bikes, the shared bikes, and they're electric assist. So Northampton has a couple of hills that you don't want to get sweaty driving up if you're on your bicycle. But to do this stuff around town, they're absolutely perfect. And I think it's really the way we need to go, because you take a bus somewhere and you still have to get somewhere else. That's where you need the bicycle. The Valley Bike Share really works out well. So.
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to do is respond to the comment made a minute ago about having people in school start taking this more seriously in terms of their actions. And I'm wondering to the panelists here what's happening in their schools, what could happen in their schools, and are there ways. One of the things this lawsuit models is having people from all across the country join together in a common effort. So wondering whether there are things schools can do across the mortar boundaries to work together.
First, I want to talk to a little bit about individual actions, especially for students. And one of that goes back to public transportation. I am also a resident of Northampton, and for all of last year, I was commuting 25 minutes to Four Rivers to go to school. But this month, especially with the UN report, I decided to switch 100% to the FRTA system, which now makes my commute 2 hours each way rather than 25 minutes each way. And I'm encouraging my friends to choose this method rather than living hypocritically and asking the state to lower its emissions rather than looking at our own as well. I just want more public transportation between schools so that students can use these systems, and instead of filling up our roads with more cars.
The Environmental Club, what are you doing?
Well, all right. So,
Talk into the mic, if you talk.
all right. So, me and Dylan, we both go to the same school, Greenfield High School. And one of the steps that our school has taken to try and preserve the greenness, to try and protect the environment, is composting. That's a really big part of our system. In our cafeteria, we have a bin filled with compost in which we put all the materials that can decompose in the dirt, and then a trash bin. And we have had many people come in and talk about the importance of this compost and how it lessens the amount of trash in the environment. And me and Dylan we have seen a very big improvement and much more participation within the system. Like, since a couple years ago when the system was implemented, it was not very popular. We ignored it. Many people just threw their trash wherever they could. But after many more talks about it, after many more presentations, we see the importance in it now. And as a community, we have banded together to use the system to our advantage to protect the environment. Dylan, would you like to say anything on this?
Yeah, so last year, I believe, there was a inter-school competition called Cleaning Greenfield or something, where the schools got measurement of how much trash they produced at the beginning of the year, and then how much they could produce at the end of the year, to see how much of a change people could make. And Greenfield ended up winning with our composting system. And I'm not saying anything, but rumor has it the Environmental Science Club ripped open every trash bag and then went through and composted what they could that the school students couldn't themselves. There was a lot of the seniors from last year. I got a lot of unhappy Snapchats from them, but they did it because they cared, and we ended up coming in first place, which was nice, but also to see that how much just 3 people in a room full of trash bags can actually do.
Thank you. And Dylan, thank you very much. I know you have to go back to school. I don't know if you're running all the way up or not.
So I'm a sophomore in high school, and I've been pretty politically active recently, mostly since the Trump election, because I've been getting more interested in like politics and law, but also because it seems like it would be kind of a sin not to be politically active. But as a minor, as someone who can't vote yet, it seems like there's only so much that I can do, and I want to know like what things legally and politically I and other minors, like high school students, can do to get active and actually make a change, especially legally.
So I'm also a minor and I cannot yet vote, but I work with my mom. I go and speak in front of committees at the State House in favor of better energy standards and in favor of carbon pricing, and I go to a lot of rallies and I speak and I make my voice heard, because that's what we can do. That's what young people can do.
There's one very simple thing that many people can do in order to make change, even though they might not even realize it. It's with their money. When you buy something from this big corporation that is very, very, like, they're not interested in the environment, they don't care what they do, they don't care how they pollute things, and you're just putting all your money into those businesses, then that doesn't show them that they're doing anything bad. But the more that we shop locally, the more that we see labels that say this was made with green materials, this was made with recycling, the more money you put into that, the more you can make a change, even if you can't vote yet.
And I want to say one very specific thing to the youth of Greenfield is that there's a youth spot on the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, a student spot. And we're looking for a youth or a student who would be interested in sitting on the committee, because we think it's a very important voice to have at the table as we're making these decisions about what we're going to do. Also, I want to say that the very active conversation recently in the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee has been, how can we support the school in their composting program with some funding resources that the town might have available, because we see it's critically important that the students be very much involved in this, because we know they take that home, they sit around the dinner table with their family, and they do education back at the home front after we do work with you in the school. So, very important link. And anyone who wants to be the student representative on the Sustainable Greenfield Committee, please see me.
I also want to note that many of the people who are involved in the lawsuit started out as minors. So there are actions to be taken.
It strikes me that if Greenfield ran the world, we'd be in better shape. But as Bill has talked about the politics of the trial and the delay of the trial, I'm wondering, how can young people here connect with those across the country, but how can the rest of us who are voting age also support keeping the pressure on, keeping public awareness of this trial
at a high level so that whatever the Supreme Court decides, it's continuing to educate the country about the urgency of the issues. And I'm wondering particularly if either of you have specific ideas about that, ways that we can support keeping this in the public eye.
Legally.
You're here, you invited us to speak, you're making our voices heard.
I don't know where to go from that, but I really appreciate being here and being able to share my fear and my desperation about our future, and that has been created by past generations. And recently I've been reconsidering whether I want to have children, because I'm not sure if I want to bring more people into a world that is destined for chaos. So making our voices heard. Thank you.
So one of the concerns, we have about 10 minutes left. And one of the concerns is I don't want us leaving here saying, well, we've done this, and then going back to doing nothing. So some thoughts about steps we can take as we leave, as we wrap this up and leave here. So Bill?
So I'd like to go back to the question before, which is close. And I would point out that there was an enormous youth movement in this country very recently and very successfully around gun violence. And after the massacres at various high schools, young people speaking for young people as young people galvanized the country. Did it through social media and did it through mainstream media. And I think that is a paradigm to use. I think it can be used as the example about how to galvanize the country. Now, there is in fact, real fact, a distraction quotient in the United States today. It's barely possible to remember the outrage of yesterday, much less the one of this morning, and that we become anesthetized in some ways to the outrage that comes out of the federal government. But that said, there is a way to sustain a movement. And the unfortunate part of environmental degradation is that there are going to be events, unnatural disasters, that will in fact galvanize the country. I don't know if it's this week or next month or next year, but we are losing the earth.
Possibly also the Supreme Court decision, couldn't that galvanize people?
I don't know what the court's decision is going to be, and I don't know whether it will be galvanizing by having a trial or allowing the trial to go forward, or will galvanize people because it will come out and people will perceive it as a political decision to not allow environmental concerns to be litigated. I don't know how it's going to come out, but I do know that young people and their use of media and social media and networks, I think there is a real opportunity here, and I hope you will use it.
So we have time for one or two more comments. If you have one, please come on down.
Hi, I just want to share with everyone a book I'm reading. It's called Drawdown. It's a New York Times bestseller, and if you want ideas about what you can do to reverse global warming, that's a good one to go to. I have been an activist in trying to fight pipelines for years and keeping fossil fuels in the ground. And I have said many times that methane is 84 times a more potent gas than carbon dioxide. Well, I was very surprised to find out that refrigeration chemicals are 1,000 times more potent of CO2 gas or more potent a gas than CO2. And in Drawdown, it is the number one thing we can do to affect climate change right away. And that means no air conditioning.
This would be a good time to mention that Greening Greenfield has a Drawdown committee, and we're looking at some programming that will be at the library after the first of the year. That will be an opportunity for the public to read the book and come in and do some book discussion. So keep an eye out for that.
Okay, this will have to be the last comment, I'm afraid, from a time standpoint.
I would just like to mention that one of the leading causes of climate change is factory farming and the eating of meat. And that it's in the top 3. And this is something that people have control over every day. We're lucky enough to be able to make food choices, and that this is something everybody can do every day, of not consuming animals, which would not only alleviate animal suffering, but would lower all the gases that are emitted into the atmosphere.
So we have unfortunately come to the end of our time, so I want to first of all thank Bill Newman and MJ Adams, and Dylan and Jacob and Madeline for helping us think through some things. I want to thank Hawks and Reed for hosting us here. The support we've gotten from CPR Continuing the Political Revolution, from GCTV, and to recognize that this event was organized by Jan here, thank you, and Sandra and I, and part of Greening Greenfield, which is an organization in town here dedicated to trying to make the environment better. Annie, come on down. We need a little music. We need a little music to get us out of here.
Yeah, no, I don't need that. On the way out, I'm going to finish with a song that What Would Pete Do? Pete Seeger. And he always closed with this particular song, and thanks for everything he had to say. You can join if you know the song. It's called Quiet Early Morning. Early Morning. They say it's darkest just before the dawn. That's what keeps me. That's what keeps me moving on. Moving on. If we could heed, these early warnings, these early mornings. Time is now. Time is now. Quiet early morning. Quiet early morning. If we could heed these early mornings. Time is now. Time is now. Quiet early morning. Let's bring it up a little bit. They say that humankind will not endure, but what makes them so doggone sure, so doggone sure. I know that you hear my singing, can make those freedom bells, can make those freedom bells go ringing. I know that you who hear my singing can make those freedom bells go ringing. So we'll work on while we live. So we'll work on while we live until we have no more to give. Until we have no more to give. And when these fingers can strum no longer, and this guitar say it's darkest just before the dawn. That's what keeps us moving on through all this world, through all this year, through joys and sorrows, we still can't